Good evening, audience. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the PMI UAE chapter webinar series. We are going to start our regular webinar today again for yet another interesting topic. I'm just waiting for the audience to join and come across from all different part of the geography, just like we have seen that in the last webinar, we made a good record attendance as well. So hoping to keep up the pace with our regular series as well like that. So welcome again. And we are going to start the webinar in a couple of minutes. Good evening. Good evening. People who are joining us. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Please feel free to write from where you're joining in case you want to tell about you. You feel free to write in the chat so that people will also learn from where we are coming from. Good evening. Good. So we are turning out to reach out to 100 very soon. So that's a good sign with us. Our webinars are turning out to be a huge success slowly. And then this year has been a phenomenal. We have been breaking all the different previous records in terms of attendance and the participation. Thanks to all you lovely audience who have been really adding value by your questions and also adding up to your knowledge levels by attending these diversified webinars under our event sections. So thank you so much for making us join together. And then let's make this success again once more. And more importantly, we are also going to turn out next month. There will be also near about 3 webinars. So we are going to definitely keep this pace continuous and with the all support and the love what you have been giving to us with the members of the webinars and even for the chapter members as well. Good. So we have reached 100 finally. So good. So I think it's a good turnout to start beginning at 7:02 now. We will wait 1 more minute so that some more people can join in. And then let me officially announce the beginning of today's series webinar there. Hey, from Morocco. Good. From Dubai. So let me introduce myself meanwhile while people are joining and shaking the hands together here virtually. So my name is Anshul Chaube and I'm the part of the events team in UAE PMI chapter. And we are here to support all the voluntary activities, and this webinar series, which we are going to do today, has the topic of effective management of project production systems. It's by our guest speaker, Mr. Roberto Arbulu, and he is joining us from Malaysia. So he definitely is in different time zone, but thanks to all his participation that he is yet taking this series of event with us at almost midnight there. So thank you, Mr. Robert, again. I'm your moderator tonight for Mr. Robert and for the audience, and I'm joined by my colleague at the back end, by Parvez, and also Mr. Amir from the events team to host this particular webinar. I would explain some housekeeping notes for the people who are joining it first time in that case, what to expect from the webinar of 1 hour, 15 minutes. So this webinar is basically we do as per the set agenda. Once we are going to have a small brief introduction about our PMI UAE chapter and what is it about, what we do, that will be followed by a small presentation. And then there will be a question and answer also at the end where we will be asking Mr. Robert in terms of what kind of knowledge sharing he want to do with the audience, and audience will also try to see that what we take away from the particular webinar topic. We will do our level best to accommodate the questions within the time frame of the webinar. We encourage you to post all your thoughts in the chat as you always do to keep it interactive and to make the webinar as much as engaging as the previous ones. With regard to posting your questions, you can keep them posting in the Q&A section. that will allow us to really segregate the questions and to structure it in a way where we can get them clubbed together if they are repeated in terms of the topic. Also, to give the heads up to the speaker, I will also try to manage the timing with him, with the questions and answers. And that would be set up as a good agenda with us. So let me share my screen meanwhile to take you all through the webinar PMI UAE chapter introduction there. So now we have 1-to-1. Okay, good turnout. We at 7:05 now. So that would be a good time for us to start here. Here you go. So let me try to make it small. Okay, so let's begin officially now with the chapter introduction. With this, a minute. Yeah. So about Project Management Institute, I think most of the people must be aware about it. We are the world leader and we work on behalf of advancing project management as a profession worldwide. UAE chapter has a vision now, which has been formulated in this year. And then the vision is stating about empowerment and influence individuals with innovative project economy principles to turn ideas into a reality. To this vision, the mission statement accompanied with it is that to disrupt and to create value-driven to our chapter members like you all and the partners who support us to become agile, innovative, productive in this platform for the growth of project economy. PMI UAE chapter is the country's chapter of the US project-based management institute run 100% by volunteers. We are proud to be in the top 5 of all the chapters globally. That's a good an achievement for us as Laurel. And in terms of members, we are growing day by day. We are passionate about project management and professional and personal development, along with networking and education. We all are dependent on you to make this chapter activities as interactive and invigorating as much as possible. So kindly contribute to our activities through interesting talks, presentation, questions, and corporate sponsorship, and also if you want to help out as a volunteer. The chapter board is held by the Mr. Adil Sultan as the president and rest of the board of directors from different part of the segments. We have enhanced benefits in 2023, where we have event section, which is diversified webinar here. And this webinar we are doing as a part of event series here. But along with that, we also do a lot of contribution in the networking and learning knowledge and career growth as well. Our silver sponsors are Dubai Properties, Imras, and collaboration partners are listed over the slide. PDU information, which will be definitely useful for all of you. So this strategic PDUs will come to you in the form of 2 PDUs automatically to your account. But in any case, I think the previous all backlogs has been cleaned up thanks to our membership team over there. Please note that PDUs will be awarded for those who stay with the webinar and then really contribute to it. And then it will automatically will get through you in your account. In case if you face any issues, please drop us an email on info@pmiua.org. To find out more about the chapter activities, you will definitely encourage you to go and then try to have a look at pmiua.org as a website. It has all sort of information about the chapters, series, activities, events, and also a lot of social media posting, which has been done phenomenally by our marketing team or the YouTube as well as LinkedIn and other social media handles. One important announcement, just wanted to let you guys know, upcoming web event, we are doing a way of working event for this particular social impact that caters to the food ATM farm on 5th of November in Ras Al Khaimah. That will be half day and 2.5 hour event somewhere there. And this information is available on our social media handles as well as on the website as well. So feel free to go and have a look at it, and then please feel free to register if you want to contribute to the cause. So this is about chapter. Before we go ahead, I would like to take a small introduction before we hand over the stage to our esteemed speaker. So our esteemed speaker is Mr. Roberto, as I explained in the beginning, and he has more than 20 years of experience in the industry with delivery and optimization of energy, industrial technology, infrastructure capital projects. He has worked on numerous owners, operators, and service providers across the different regions, including Middle East, North America, South America, Europe, Australia, and Asia. He is the author of our technical publications in journals and is frequently invited to speak at conferences where he speaks passionately about project production, system optimization, control, and project supply chains. and the different methods associated with that. Roberto is the member of Gulf Downstream Association, Project Institute PPI as an instructor for professional certification programs. Also, since 2008, Roberto has participated as VDC instructor and the advisor in the Stanford University Center of Facility Engineering. He has a civil engineering degree by education, and also he has done the management and certificate in management of technology from Hess School of Business at University of California, Berkeley. So this is about our speaker, and now I would introduce speaker formally over there. So Robert is already here. Yes, here you go. Robert, I think we are all eager to learn from you and want to know that what is you have for us tonight. Over to you.
And thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I want to thank as well PMI, United Arab Emirates, for the invitation to be part of this webinar today. So let me share my screen and we can get going immediately. As I do this, I also want to acknowledge that we have people from different parts of the world. So including the United States and not only the Gulf countries. So I should say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that several organizations around the world are actively and proactively looking to adopt, and this idea of project production systems and how can we effectively manage them, right? In essence, we're going to do three things in the webinar. I'm going to take you through, to start, a bit of the thinking, also a bit of the situation that we see around the world in terms of project delivery, and the thinking behind what some of these organizations are doing to approach project delivery. Number two, we're going to explore the technical basis associated with project production systems, which is related to operation science, as well as some examples to finish on how, again, some organizations are implementing these, applying these, making it operational so they can influence their outcomes, okay? We do have some exercises, some quizzes for you to for the webinar to be a bit more interactive, so please be ready for that, and we'll provide the instructions on how to do that at the right time. So let me start. And let me start by sharing with you some interesting facts. About 10 years ago, in this case, McKinsey & Company, some friends from McKinsey & Company studied the performance of projects around the world, focusing on mining, oil and gas, and infrastructure at the time, and provided a very alarming situation about what was happening with projects. And they concluded that about 98% of projects were experiencing cost overruns and delays. And these delays were about 20 months in average compared to the original schedule. These are very large projects, some of them larger than $1 billion. As you can see here, right? And the cost overrun was about 80% of the original value. What also has happened, this is last year, a separate study, almost 10 years apart, okay, I repeat, almost 10 years apart, are depicting that the situation hasn't really changed much, right? We're still, as a project industry, experiencing significant issues on how we deliver projects, and our projects are complex. We're talking about oil and gas projects, we're talking about infrastructure projects, building data centers around the world, you know, very large and complex infrastructure in general, right? But the situation tells us, based on this second analysis, I repeat, 10 years after the initial one almost, that we still experience significant delays. We are experiencing cost overruns, and the situation is a very critical one, okay? And the reason why I bring this up is because what we also see in how companies behave, how project teams behave, and we know about Glack and Foster's ability to influence, which was created in 1975, but it still applies today, right? That the ability to influence reduces as we get closer towards the end of the project, right? But what we see is that there's a significant management intervention as we get to the end because of trying to save, if you will, the performance of the projects as we get towards the end of their execution, right? And as we also see, you want to be able to understand in this webinar the concept of work in process. What we also see is that the amount of work in process that is actually in projects, I will explain this technically later on, that we see in projects increasing from very, very beginning, okay? And so as industry, those of us involved in projects tend to focus on a significant intervention at the end. The situation is our projects are not performing as we want. And obviously one of the questions is, there must be a gap or multiple gaps. Something is happening, right? And so it's not the intent of this webinar to go into a forensic analysis of projects in general, but bring to your attention a common denominator, one very important gap, not the only one very important gap that we have been able to identify, and several organizations been able to identify as they move through the delivery of projects. There is a significant emphasis on project administration. Project administration meaning focusing on contracts, focusing on risk management, focusing on progress and reporting of progress, right? We tend to have an over-reliance on reporting and forecasting of project progress, which seems to be enamored, if you will, with understanding progress, but that doesn't mean that we are actually attacking the root cause of some of these gaps, right? And one thing that we also have found is that there is an underinvestment in terms of effort and time, and also the use of technology on how we produce across the project lifecycle. And the message here is, I would say, relatively simple. How can we expect to achieve better performance if we do not focus on improving how we do work? This webinar is about how we do work. And if we don't influence that how, it's going to be very difficult to pretend to achieve different project outcomes, okay? And so the emphasis is on production, okay? The term production, by the way, depends on which company you are with, right, on your background. If you are, for instance, in oil and gas, the term production typically relates to what happens after the project, right? Producing gas, producing oil. But the reality is that in the project life cycle, we also produce, right? There is project production, if that makes sense, right? There is project production. We produce in engineering as early phases of design. Then we move into detail engineering. We produce multiple deliverables. We move into fabrication and assembly. We then move into a more physical type production. Then we move into construction of assets and commissioning, which is obviously another example of physical production. We produce all the time, right? If we don't influence how we do that, it's going to be a difficult thing to do for us to improve project performance, okay? Now, there are other companies, multiple companies, I should say, around the world that have significantly and proactively approach the way they produce during the project life cycle. These are just few of hundreds of examples that are available these days from oil and gas, people exposing opportunities to reduce a significant amount of days, moving almost 50% faster with some cost savings, the reduction of well cost for those, some companies, this is in the United States, when they work on onshore fields, very complex onshore fields, on facilities, processing facilities, LNG facilities, companies reducing cycle times from 13 to 52%, becoming more predictable, right? From very low levels like 14 to significantly higher levels like 64 in this example on the bottom left, okay? Others like infrastructure, for instance, this is example of Terminal 5 in London in the early 2000s, by the way, that they were able to become the first major civil project in the United Kingdom in the last 4 years at a time to be delivered on time. And they adopted a production system perspective to how the project was actually delivered. And so the question is, what are they doing exactly? What is the thinking behind what these companies are doing that is enabling them to unlock significant opportunities in the project supply chains, in the project life cycle, and how they are doing it? So we are going to explore that thinking first, okay, before we look into what exactly they are implementing, what exactly they are applying. One of the key ideas behind the thinking that these organizations have adopted is that they differentiate schedules from production systems. The schedules and production systems are not the same. In our industry, the industry of engineering and construction or project delivery, we are enamored with the schedules, right? Everything is a schedule. We use Gantt charts, and they have a purpose, okay? And from a production thinking perspective, those schedules define the demand that a production system should respond to. I repeat, the schedules define the demand, what should happen, what we want to happen, that the actual production system should respond to. If the production system, the one on the right in this schematic, doesn't have the capacity to meet the demand imposed by the schedule, the project team will experience schedule delays, right? Even though the schedule says that we should finish by a certain date, I repeat, if the production system doesn't have the capacity to deliver, there's no way we're going to make it. If the production system has the capacity, or it has more capacity to meet or exceed the demand, there might be an opportunity to accelerate, if acceleration is an objective. Sometimes acceleration is not an objective, but the idea is that the schedules are not production systems. They can work together, as you can see here, right? If we want to move the schedule faster, the production system might tell us if we can or not, okay? Production systems do not replace the schedules. Project schedules do not replace production systems. So today we're going to focus on the right, okay? Acknowledging that the schedules are important and they set the demand for production systems. The concept of a production system is something associated with things moving through, units of production moving through, right? So if I have a pile, I'm doing piles, for instance, on a construction site, the piles probably need to be engineered. They need to be, let's say, fabricated if we're using precast piles, right? We need to transport them to the site, and then we need to install them, right? That will be like an end-to-end production system on how the piles, I repeat, move through the system, okay? When a pile moves through the system, it takes a time for one pile not only to be installed, that's the easy part, but it takes some time for the whole process to occur. That time is what we are going to introduce here as the cycle time. But when we do operate production systems, when we manage production systems, we don't have, obviously, in this simple example of a pile, one pile going through, we could have multiple units going through. Therefore, as we load the system, let's say, in order to respond to certain demand, we could have what is known an amount of work being processed, right? and waiting to be processed, called work in process, or WIP, right? An amount of work in the system, correct? So the first idea is we have the cycle time, the time it takes, and X amount of units being processed at any given time, okay? Work in process should not be confused with work in progress, although they share the same acronym, okay? But work in process is more a production measurement, which I'm going to expand on in a minute. Work in progress is an earned value management type measurement. It's typically measured in percentages, okay? But based on this simple concept of a production system, and remember the cycle time, the time it takes for something to move through the system, one of the key ideas is, if we are looking to accelerate, how can we get systems in engineering or in commissioning? How can we get equipment, modules, packages, whatever you can think of, even the example that I gave you about the piles, through the production system quicker, right? In other words, how can we reduce cycle time? How can we, without necessarily increasing more resources, right, move quicker, right? We are going to explore that in the next few more minutes. But I have a question for you, okay? And this is where I look forward to have a bit of interaction with the audience at the moment. And the quiz, we're going to ask you two questions. The first one is, what do you think, based on your own experience, is the relationship between work in process intuitively, okay? This is more on intuition, intuitively. The relation between the amount of work that is currently being processed in a system and the time it takes to do the work. Do you think that if we increase work in process, cycle time increases, almost like a linear, or do you think it's the opposite, right? That's just one question. The other one on the right, which we will do after we will do first actually, is focusing on the utilization. And the concept of utilization means capacity utilization, right? If we use the capacity of the production system at 100%, meaning that we're somewhere here, right? Do we think that we can move faster or not? And if so, how these relationships might actually work. So that being said, we're going to give you 6 choices. And the first one we're going to work on is the utilization, the capacity utilization, and the cycle time. The question is simple. Do you think that this relationship is like number 1, straight line, or number 2, it's actually the opposite, coming down? The more we use the capacity, the better for us. We can reduce the cycle time. Or do you think that it behaves? Or if you're not 100% sure, you can also go for option 6. The way we're going to do this is, if you don't mind, I'm sure you have a phone with you, right? Take your phone, scan this QR code, right? And you're going to be given these 6 options right away. Pick one of them, okay? And we're going to start getting the answers. We have right now 155 participants. Let's see how many of you can actually provide your opinion on this relationship, okay? So if you don't mind, go ahead, and I'm going to be waiting for some of these responses. Okay. So let's keep reloading this. Okay. We're going to wait one more minute. Okay. So we have about 19 people have responded. So I encourage, we have 154 people in the audience. So please, if you don't mind going ahead and provide your opinion. This is anonymous. Okay, this is anonymous. Okay. Let's wait another 30 seconds. We keep reloading the system. Okay, so conscious of time, I think this is probably a good sample. Let's analyze it very quickly. So 22 people, which is about 73%, believe that if we increase capacity utilization, the cycle time will go up. There is about 16 or so percent that have a different opinion, which means that either is this line or this curve, it's just a behavior, but if we increase capacity utilization in both cases, option 2 and 4, the cycle time will come down, right? There's a 7% that is no difference, and obviously someone in the audience not sure about it, which is okay. Okay. Now, this is an interesting thing because if you think about it, if we are all members of the same project team and we have this belief, option 3 or option 2 and 4, we are going to be making different decisions. Exactly the opposite decisions, right? Some people are going to try to increase capacity utilization, like to reduce cycle time, and others will be careful about it because if they increase capacity utilization much, cycle time will increase, right? Exactly opposite situations. Okay, and so let's keep that in mind. We'll come back to this in a minute because let's move to the second one. This is now the relationship between work in process, which is a number of units, right? The meaning of work in process is the number of units in a given production system being processed at any given time. If we increase that number, is the cycle time going to increase, like option 1 or option 4, or what option would you go for? Similarly, please go ahead, scan this QR code and select the option that you believe is the right one. How work in process and cycle time relate between each other. Okay, so we have 4 people going for option 4, 3 people on alternative options, option 2 and 3, which are similar. Let's keep looking at this. Okay. All right. Give it 30 more seconds, get more people to respond. Okay, that's probably enough. So similarly, what is happening here is that some of you believe that if we increase working process, the cycle time will go up quickly, right? Other ones believe it's the opposite, that if we put more work in the system, the cycle time will go down, which is option 5 and option 2. And some of you believe that there's no really difference. The cycle time will not change if we increase the amount of work in the system. We will explore the answer. Similarly, we have these sort of two extremes, right? They're not the same. We don't make the same decisions, right? But let me share something with you. This is more common than you think. We have done this sort of exercise several times before. These are photos of the same questions or on different project teams in working sessions, where you can see the difference in utilization on the one on the top in both cases, and working process and cycle time. So it is very normal to in the project management community, our community, to not necessarily be on the same page about what is the right answer, which I will give it to you in a few more minutes, by the way. Okay, there is a single right answer on this, and we will come back to that. Okay, but the important thing is we need to gain a common understanding about the opportunities that we have to optimize performance. And this is one of the first steps that a lot of organizations are doing is, okay, how do we know what should be the decisions that we need to make on how we optimize work, how we produce in a better way. The thinking that they're putting in place is this idea of 4 verbs, 5 levers, and 3 curves, right? Associated with the management of production or project production management as well. So when we say 4 verbs, we mean that if we don't focus on activities that are the production activities that transform, right, materials into or information into final products, or even materials into something that is already installed, what are those activities, those operations that are driving production? If we don't focus on them, it's going to be really hard for us to influence performance, right, from design all the way to build. So if we want to concentrate on improving, we must focus on where this production actually occurs. Okay. The second idea of the 5 levers. If we want to influence cost, time, and use of cash, the idea of production brings 5 options, 5 levers that we can play with. These 5 levers are interconnected. That's why you see these plus signs in the middle. From product design, how we design the facility, the asset, right? If we go for a modularization strategy, for instance, we're working on an industrial facility, we go for modules. That has huge implications on the production process design, the second lever. The production process design. And the production process design, by the way, is not a schedule. It's just how we do the work. The last 3 levers are very important because capacity is another lever, you know, if not only about use of labor or engineers or equipment, right, but also space, right? Space is not graphically depicted here, but we could have a lot of labor, a lot of equipment, for instance. If we don't have access to the space, we don't have capacity to execute, right? And by the way, resources and capacity are not synonymous, right? Capacity is a rate in a production system. Resources are those capacity contributors, okay? Inventory is not just about the stocks of materials, by the way. Sometimes we hear the term inventory, we think, oh, the stocks of materials. No, there's another element of inventory, which is the working process, as we were discussing, right? Inventory of work being processed at one time or work waiting to be processed. And we will see in projects that there's a huge opportunity on reducing the amount of time work is waiting to be processed. If we are trying to compress our schedules, compress cycle times, we need to find a way of better understanding what happens when work waits to be processed. And variability. We are experiencing variability in all our projects, right? We don't have a project that is not exposed to variability. Variability it's impossible to eliminate it. If someone tells you that we can eliminate all variability, they're lying to you, okay? It is impossible. We will always live in a world that something is changing, and the project world it's known for a lot of changes as we go through, okay? So variability is something to take into account as well. These are things that we can play with, right? We can influence, but they are actually interconnected. They're no free move. If we make one change on the process design, what are the implications on the resources and the capacity? What are the implications on the amount of work that we need in the system? Are we introducing variability? For instance, if we make some adjustments to the design of the facility, what kind of sources of variability are we introducing, right? If we design a facility that have piles that are all unique, they're not the same, all unique, are we introducing more variability in the system? Of course we are. We have uniqueness of items, right? And so there are this perspective on no free move on these components, okay? Now, you might be thinking, well, how does this relate to a more perhaps conventional view of project management, right? From a project management perspective, to achieve the same objective, cost, time, and cash, we have the ability to play with the scope and quality, look at the schedules, and look at the resources, right? We typically say, resource loaded schedule. That terminology has been used in the industry for many years, right? But these three things are really behind what is known the iron triangle, right? And so, but if we focus on work, on how we produce, we can get access to more levers, the one at the bottom, more levers that we can play with, right? Specifically, inventory and variability, which are blind spots in the way we approach project production in our industry globally, okay? But let's continue this and have another question for you and another interactive exercise for the webinar. Let's say that you plan 10 activities for tomorrow, okay? Not for next week, not for next month, tomorrow in a 24-hour period. This is a construction example. It could be other type of work, but let's say 10 activities for tomorrow. Based on your experience, your gut feeling, let's say, how many typically you think will get done out of the 10? Not how many should be done. We should do 10, right? How many will get done? So in order to answer this question, please scan this QR code, again, similar exercise, and select one of the options that you will be given. Do you think that we will get done in a 24-hour period less than 2, between 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 7 or 8, or 9 or 10? So please take time to do this, and let's see what results we start getting. Okay, good. We'll start getting some results. We have about 166 people in the webinar, so I encourage those of you, again, this is anonymous. We're not interested in your names, just to have an anonymous opinion. Okay. Well, let's stop here. That gives us a good picture. All right, so most of you believe that 7 or 8, right? Some of you that we have, we changed this as a percentage. Let me see. Yep. Well, 40%, excuse me, less than half, between 7 and 8. And if you take into account, so more than half of you, right? This one, more than half of you is less than 50%, right? They're like almost divided, right? Half less than 50, the other half more than 50. Well, we have been able to measure this across multiple sectors of the industry in different type of projects, and the average number that we have been able to measure is 54%. Almost like take a coin, flip it, and that is the probability for the next 24 hours as we execute work that we can get things done. 54%, okay? And as an average, it means that it has higher values and lower values, right? Almost the same result here, okay? But if you think about it, if we execute work with 50%, being 50% reliable, this term reliability is going to be important moving forward. There's going to be a huge ripple effect on what happens through the actual production, right? A huge ripple effect, right? Something is happening on a daily basis with 5, in this average number I gave you, with 5 of the 10 activities that we are not able to complete them as we expected. This number also applies to engineering, by the way, if you're wondering, not just physical type work, right? In engineering, we have measured the same and we get very similar number, right? And so we need to do something to increase and become more reliable, right? How can we produce better and avoid the ripple effect of this average number as we go through, okay? So, but let's explore how we can do that. And thanks for responding to this poll. Give me here 1 second. Okay, so this becomes the answer. We talk about 4 verbs, 5 levers, and 3 curves. A lot of organizations are focusing on the use of operation science. These are 3 key operation science curves. And the one on the left are 2 curves in one, okay? But let me start with the one in the middle very quickly because of time. What capacity utilization is telling us is that if we increase capacity utilization and try to get to 100%, we can quickly see the cycle time taking more time, okay? Taking longer. Some of you selected this option, right? Now you can see who was right, who was not as clear as probably need to be on this. An example in real life, not necessarily in construction, when you're driving on a highway. If you're driving and there's a lot of traffic and you stop, right? What that really means is that the capacity of the highway reached 100% utilization. The implications for you, the driver, is that you are not moving. You're just stuck in traffic, right? You stop the car, right? And it means that the time to get home, let's say, for you increases, okay? So that's an analogy on something that has nothing to do with projects, right? But we experience on a daily basis as we drive on highways, right? It's the same effect, right? So that's number one. That's one of the curves that we ask you to sort of go for the quiz. This one on the left is there are 2 charts in one, but we're going to look at working process and cycle time, right? And if we increase, excuse me, if we increase working process in a system, the amount of work that we put in the system, this quickly have implications on cycle time. The time to get the work done will get extended, right? But if we use the other chart with the throughput of the system, throughput is a rate, is units over time. As you can see here also, we get to a point where we start increasing working process towards the right, and we don't get much more throughput, right? But it costs us a lot of money to have more work in the system because then we start adding more resources, and then things cost more, and then we start losing a bit control of the performance. But there is actually a spot somewhere here, right, where we can say there's some sort of optimal amount of work that needs to be put in the system that give us a good throughput, right? If the demand is somewhere here, you know, the demand being also a rate, how many units we need to produce, how many piles do we need to install every day, how many piles do we need to fabricate every day, or things like that, right? On how many piles, as the example I was sharing with you before, on how many piles should I be working at any given time, right? The working process. And so this is an interesting concept of working process because working process becomes a leading indicator. Cycle time becomes more like a lagging indicator. In order to measure cycle time, I need to wait for the cycle to be completed. Therefore, I can measure it, but it's also an important measurement to keep in mind, Okay, so the organizations that are looking at effectively managing production systems, which is the title of this webinar, are using this know-how to look at opportunities and to establish optimal parameters on how they should manage and control the production systems and how they should optimize them. This is based on science. I'm not going to take you through all of this. We don't have time for this, just to create a bit of awareness. There are things like Little's Law that give us, if we increase, mathematically speaking, the working process, our cycle time will go up. Cycle time has multiple components, right? In a specific production process or an operation, right? Two of those components, which is called the batch time and the queue time, are very important, okay? We have found that if we are trying to compress cycle times, more than 90% of the opportunity is not on how we do actually or how we execute an operation, it's on work waiting that nothing is being done to it, right? These are usually the longest segments of cycle time, as you can see here, okay? And the way we batch work, right? We release work to the next person in the production process or the next company in large batches, right? The larger the batch, the longer the cycle times, right? And these are all production terminologies, right? We mentioned before variability and inventory are blind spots that significantly increase project cost and schedule duration. My suggestion to you, think about this, right? Variability cannot be eliminated, that it can be reduced, right? We're going to show you some examples of what people are actually making operational to understand that, and the implications of inventory, particularly work in process, are quite significant. The question for you is, okay, so what? Why should you care about all this stuff, right? What's the point, right? The point is that if we are focusing on the way we produce, we can become more predictable. There's a lot of emphasis right now around the world about predictability, right? We do want to be more predictable. Our outcomes are not predictable, as we show at the beginning of the webinar, right? But there's also another point, right? You can predict that you will be late and you are predictable. Your prediction, you are predictable, right? How is that going to help you, right? I repeat, you will predict that you will be late, right? But how is that going to help you? And so the predictability equation requires all the components. And one of those components is to increase how reliable we are at looking at work execution and focusing on our production systems. So I'm getting towards the end of the webinar. I'm going to show you a couple examples of, okay, how do I use this? You might be asking yourself, okay, what's the point Roberto is trying to make? What do I do with all this, right? And to simplify it, what I put on the table here for you to think about is two opportunities. We can model and optimize our production systems. We can use computers, technology these days, to model them and optimize them. We can also control an active production system, and we can improve it systematically. So I'm going to show you some examples on what other organizations are doing in these two areas. Let's start with model and optimize. What do we mean? We mean about creating digital twins of production systems, using technology to create a model of our production systems, put parameters on them, we map them, we model them, and then we can see what the optimal level should be before we go and do the work. This is not the same as doing a P50 or P90 analysis on the schedules, by the way. This focuses on the production systems, not on the schedule. The schedule will set the demand that the production system needs to respond to. If the production system is not capable of responding to that demand, we will certainly experience schedule delays, as we introduced earlier. So what we typically see, and this is an example of piping, as you can see, we have ISOs, we have spool drawings, we cut the pipe, we weld the pipe, we do blast and paint, right? The schedule tells us that this is what we want, but the production system tells us, hey, that what you want is not possible, right? This is how far you're gonna get. The production system, the throughput of the production system is gonna be limited because of multiple different reasons, right? And what a lot of companies, I repeat, are doing and analyzing the right side here to determine if the schedule can be met or not, okay? That's one element. They're also looking at rapidly analyzing alternative production strategies for their projects on whatever production system they're analyzing. It could be an end-to-end project for engineering to commissioning, or it could be something much more precise, could be like an engineering production system, right? And as you can see, you have for one specific strategy, which is this one, different points, and these are different outputs of the digital twin that is telling us we can be as early as this or we can be as late as that in different outcomes, right? You can run thousands of simulations on this, and these are just different production strategies that are different performance, right? This one can, in all of them, we can reduce cost and time at the same time, right? And the changes, as you can see here, from one strategy like this one here, number one and number two being the current strategy in this particular example, there's significant compression, right? More than 100 days in this particular case. And so the idea is to use models of production systems to understand how the production system behaves. This is an example of engineering only, where you do pipe stress and piping. You know, you have a specific way of how the work is done with a stress analysis and without a stress analysis. They need to produce 1,700 engineering deliverables by a certain date. This is a true example, right? They have the current capacity here, and what the analysis is telling them is that they're not going to make it. That's what they want to do it October 20. They're not going to make it, right? And so the analysis on the production system help them to reduce the amount, identify opportunities to reduce the working process, but almost double the size of workers, reduce 100% of that, and also identify where they needed to increase capacity in a very selective way. In this case, they went for this option of more engineers. A very simple example, by the way. It's not a lot of engineers, as you can see here, but it tells you how you can identify how much work you should be processing at any given time and what should be your load. This example of supply, not engineering, but supply, is looking at, you know, a company that was testing if increasing the demand for certain items for a given project or across multiple projects, if the production system can respond to that demand. In this case, more like a supply system, a supply chain, right? And the conclusion was the supply system was not able to respond to double the demand, and that at about 1.5 the demand, the system required 60% more capacity. And the capacity profiles, which are this one here, when the demand is twice, completely different, and they're doing this kind of analysis, right? Can the supply chain for our project respond accordingly, right? And it's through a production system perspective. This is construction and commissioning. Very similarly, it is a road construction, an infrastructure project, where the team was actually be able to identify opportunity to improve cycle time in 300%. And there was improvements about 100% compared to more conventional lean practices. A lot of companies are looking at lean practices these days, as you all know, and they can get not only the model, but also understand what are the issues with the utilization of capacity, right? What elements of the capacity will be close to 100%. As you remember in the charts, if we get to 100%, we get the cycle time extended. In production terms, capacity utilization getting to 100%, that means this is the bottleneck of the operation or of the entire production system. The second idea was, okay, not only modeling and optimize it using computers and analyze optimal levels, but when we have an active production system, how can we control it and improve it? And here it's important to highlight that control is not the same as controls, right? It's not the same. We do a lot of project controls, but production control is a bit different. Production control focuses on capacity, inventory, and variability, and how we do the work. And the application of production control focuses on putting in place an engine. And I know Arshel is already coming here, so I understand the time is, we're getting close. An engine that combines 4 components, focusing on the standard processes, developing production schedules, which is not the same as master schedules. This will be more a parallel or an approach that augments, focusing on how we allocate capacity to the work through production planning and getting access to different set of analytics that complement those are typically brought by project controls, okay? These are examples of engineering that have been able to reduce 14 days ahead of a schedule and place all the equipment POs on time, create packages through a systematic engine, I repeat, on how they plan and control the work, not just focusing on the schedules. This is a construction of supply chain, the construction of Terminal 5 that achieve on-time completion, and they actually save about $125 million on savings, about 10% of the cost, where there was a very, very, very strong focus on production, not just on the scheduling, okay? There's another one in Australia, construction of a desalination plant. Similar, the team, you can see these photos of the team working on what are those production processes, measuring systematically are they reliable or not, and how that reliability can actually increase over time, okay? So remember, these are the main things organizations around the world are focusing on. There's more to say about this, but conscious of time, we are not going to expand more of it, just to leave you with those ideas. But one more thing very quickly, which is these days with technologies, we can have in place a true digital twin that have a digital model and connected with the reality of our projects. A lot of organizations are moving towards this. This is a technology that is already in place. This is not research being done by universities, but this is happening as we speak, okay? But as long as we understand these are digital twins of project production systems. Digital twins are not 3D models or things like that, because sometimes some people might think that digital twins are 3D models. These are digital twins of your production systems, okay? How we can connect the actual production system with technology and how we can move forward. This is one of the ways that organizations are actually approaching. And I leave you with this, just a bit of a joke. I ran into this cartoon not too long ago, and I would like to give the credit to someone called KL, but I don't know who that person is. But as you can see here, you know, learn to explain project delays. A lot of people, we get into that game, but, you know, are we really learning to avoid project delays, right? And that's where a lot of organizations are moving towards, right? How can we learn to avoid them, right? And move from the queue on the left to the queue on the right, okay? If you don't mind, just to finish, and Arshel, we finish with this.
Yes.
It will be interesting for you, the audience, please, to scan the QR code and type 2 words of key takeaways that you might have from this webinar, and then we move into some Q&A quickly. But please scan the QR code, type some keywords, and let's see what we get from you. What are you taking away from this very brief discussion on production systems? Capacity, achievables. Okay, we encourage more people to keep doing it. Control, optimize. Yep. Remember, control is not the same as project controls. Control is about direction, the idea of 4 verbs, cycle time, deep yet simply out, eye-opener, production, streaming the processes, educational, on-time delivery, optimization is one of the strongest ones, production as well, working process, 5 levers again, utilization, keep changing. So appreciate your input. Every time this changes, there are people actually adding to it. So good interaction. Thank you so much.
Yep,
Excellent.
I think it's a quite a good input around there. You can see it's very diversified output, Robert. I think that's what
Yes.
you were expecting around, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah,
just want to get a sense as well what people are taking with them, right? What they are taking away with them. And I
right.
think at this point in time, I just want to thank you, Archer, for the opportunity. Thank everyone joining here. We have 163 people, and I'm ready to address some questions following your lead.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks a lot, Dr. Robert, over there with your all PPT slides. I think audience is also asking that we would be getting the slides post this webinar. So then please engage with us. We can try to help them out in that regard. We have one question meanwhile, is which is from Mr. Ziada, and then for Ashraf is also asking the similar thing. Uh, in their view, actually, there's a agile concept, right? So is agile is really more convenient, or waterfall is more convenient to improve production system, or where they will fit in which context more appropriately? Any thoughts?
Absolutely. That's a great question, right? And I think we should start answering this question by going back to history a little bit, because the agile movement indeed is a deviation from the conventional waterfall, right? But the agile movement started on the development of software, right?
Yep.
And for software projects, right?
Yes.
But when you have projects that are more physical, meaning construction projects and things, the idea of agile might have some limitations, especially when you're talking about physical production, right? A lot of organizations are using agile to address the front end, like engineering, do scrums, and it helps to reduce the size of the batch on how they do the work. So there's a strong relationship between agile and the reduction of the batch sizes that we were looking at on that cycle time formula, right? The whole idea of waterfall and agile is to reduce the size of the batch on how work move forward. But to reduce cycle times, there are multiple components. So batching is only one of them, and the agile movement or practices in general are indeed addressing some of this. But again, I think that they're more applicable, just my personal opinion, more applicable to processes perhaps like engineering, more business processes. But when we get to physical production, things change a little bit, right? Absolutely. We need more robust ways.
Yeah. So what are the tools or the softwares which can be used in optimizing production system? Anything specific which are industry-wide being used, and would like to recommend anything?
Yes. So for instance, our company has developed a system called the SPS Production Manager. It's a web-based system that is purposely designed as a project production management and project production system optimization tool. A lot of organizations are using it. Some of the examples that I was showing it's basically based on that. And the intent is that people can actually model those production systems, right? Especially using the technology. Now we have AI, machine learning, all this stuff, right? So if we want to use all that technology to optimize our work, we need a platform that allows us to do that, right? This is not something that you're going to do with pen and a piece of paper. It's much more complicated, right? And so SPS Production Manager is just an option that we see.
Okay. Mr. Imad is asking that how we are going to cap the capacity part or the work in progress part, because there should be a defining tipping point of changing processes. So how do we define that? The capacity part, work in process limits, or the tipping point of the changing processes. How do we define that actually?
Right. So there are two questions really in there, right? The capacity side and the working process side. So let's start with one of them. Access to resources give us the capacity, correct? There are specific type of resources that are capacity contributors, even access to the space, as I explained earlier, right? And so and capacity is always limited. There's no system that has unlimited capacity, right? It's always limited. We can determine what should be the capacity utilization optimal levels when we model and optimize production systems. We can accurately determine that for different type of resources, right? And more importantly, we can determine what resources are actually with very low capacity utilization levels, which means that there's a capacity buffer, right? There's a capacity buffer in some of those resources. But to do the analysis systematically, we need to model our production systems, because capacity utilization is not the same as productivity, right? It's not the same. On the working process side, working process defined as an amount of work.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can quickly go back to this chart, right? So there is if we have a specific demand in any system, demand is a rate, units over time, right? A system needs to produce X number of piles per day, for instance, right? It's a rate. If this is that rate, and we are able to generate our curve of throughput and WIP, we can determine at this intersection that this will be our optimal amount of work in process to achieve that demand. Beyond that, we have excessive work in process, and that will cost us more money. It will in simple terms, this materializes as multiple deliverables being open in engineering that we don't need to be open or to have open, or it also materializes as multiple work fronts on a construction site that we don't need to open because we're basically, it's too much work in process in the system. Okay. So the way we identify the optimal working process is through some operation science and some of the calculations that I was actually showing earlier.
Perfect. And that takes me to the concept of which Toyota has launched around the Kanban when work in progress came, and the work in progress limits were set on the production level. And that was limiting the tipping point of optimization inflection perspective, where we are putting the more resources thinking that it is going to accelerate our productions. But in fact, it is going reverse way around there. And that is where I think you're explaining this beautiful concept back. One question is around, is this prediction of resource capital, prediction of use of resources, is it similar to resource leveling?
Yes, it is. It is similar, because if we go, for instance, let me answer this, I hope the right way, with a graphic here. Just bear with me. Let me see here. Right. So if you look at this, right, these charts. So these are multiple different types of resources. It could be a welder. It could be a piece of equipment, right? Things like that. And there's one of them that has more than 100% capacity utilization, which is not even technically doable, right? What this means is that the production system requires this particular resource to cross the 100% in order to meet the demand. But you don't have more than 100%, right? So you will have to increase the capacity of that particular resource, but not the other ones, right? Not the other ones. And so if you look at this here, the small ones, you have a significant capacity buffer, right? And so you can start leveling, meaning bring this up a little bit, right? And that might imply that you can either get rid of resources or move resources somewhere else, right? That's where the balancing comes in. So it is related, but we need to start with the concept of capacity utilization.
Yeah. I think the last question before we terminate the session with the closure would be that in context of the infrastructure roadworks where the maintenance activities are being carried around, how can effective project production system can really be optimized to accelerate the output with the aspect of long-term sustainability and quality of the road network being into the level? Any thoughts with this to close up?
Yes. So if I understand the question correctly, it's about maintenance, correct? Not construction.
Yeah. So it's maintenance activities are being carried out in infrastructure road network. So how we can optimize it with the production output plus ensuring the long-term sustainability of the quality as well.
Excellent. That's an excellent question. And I will provide the following insight. When you do maintenance, it could be a road, it could be a facility. you name it, you have different types of work, okay? Some work is urgent, okay? You cannot plan for it. So, which means you have to have capacity to react quickly, right? Some work can be planned in advance, right? And so you cannot treat the two types of work the same way, right? Yeah. And so if you identify work, maintenance work, that can be planned in advance, meaning a month from now or whatever the time frame before, you have the ability to optimize it as much as you are able to. It could be repaving the road, you know, the closure of the road. You can create a model like this one, right? And say, okay, how can we do that faster, right? Sometimes maintenance is a much more complex. You have to demolish a section of a road or an elevated platform and build a new one. That's a whole project by itself, but it's maintenance too, right? And so there are degrees of maintenance, right? But the first one I mentioned is when you have to dispatch. That's the real term. Dispatch a crew to a specific location for immediate maintenance, unexpected, right? In that case, you don't have time to model things. You don't have time to do all this stuff, right? Therefore, the use of a capacity buffer, it's a very important one, right? Differentiate these two different production systems. You cannot manage them the same way.
Wow, I think that was quite a neat answer to that close up that session, Dr. Roberto. So I think we did a great job with a lot of the quiz part you have played around there. So thank you so much for taking out the time at the late night in Malaysia to come up online, to put the effort around and to answer the questions more effectively to the audience there. So really thank and appreciate your efforts and time there, Doctor. So I think I would like to give also a thank to the audience. You have been really great in asking those great questions. Keep doing that with the subsequent webinars with all of us. I would like to give a shout out to our friends in marketing team. I think we're responsible and doing the great job of posting all the information about all our webinars and the events in our social media. And also, I will not say good night without saying thank you to all of you, the chapter volunteers who have always been helping us behind the scenes, making this webinar successful. Our colleagues from membership outreach and finance volunteering governance as well have played their significant part with all of us. So I think I'm going to conclude the session today with all your permission around there. So thank you, Robert. And with the next webinar, together with my colleague behind the camera, Amir, and the events team here, this Anchal here, wishing out a pleasant evening to all of you. So thank you so much for your participation and God bless. Take care. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.